do on issues that are related to the community development. We have a guest here who's going to talk about the food system, as you all know. And so I'm supposed to introduce 12th Moon. And I just got the word that no matter what I say, he's probably done it. So he's an artist of foodie. As you know, he's chair of the board of GreenStar. He was a council or chair of the council at GreenStar, and has a lot to say about that today. But also an astrologer and involved in crystals, and an herbalist and a builder, a green builder. We talked about different styles of building. And so 12th Moon has been involved in a lot of things that are relevant to changing an orientation from an industrial model to some other model. And so we're happy to welcome him here today. The format will be just 12th Moon and you guys, and no paraphernalia, but Angela is going to record. And Fred is going to pass around a sheet for signing up if you haven't gotten on the email list and want to put your email address. Okay?
Thank you.
Great.
Good morning. I hope you don't mind if I sit down, because I'd rather be comfy. So, food's a pretty big topic, but I'd like to kind of jump backwards for a minute and at least share some of the experience of my growing up. I was born in the late 40s. My grandparents had a small vegetable farm, but they didn't really consider it a farm. It was a family thing. So my grandparents worked it during the week, and on the weekends, cousins, aunts, uncles would come in and work on the weekend. And when it came to harvest time, everybody knows, if you're a farmer, that harvest comes and it's all dancing in the barn and your work is done. Not. You work for quite a while trying to raise this food, and then harvest, all of a sudden you have to dry seeds, you have to dry beans, you have to can, you have to get food prepped for the winter. So we used to make soap, we did all kinds of things like that. Food was very close at hand. My grandfather was actually quite strict about some things. He would get the water boiling and then go, "Get the corn!" And I would literally go out and get the corn and husk it when the water was ready. But the flavor, I gotta tell you, or the flavor of a really good tomato right off the vine. So, okay, let's fast forward 60, 70 years, and here we are. And my name 12th Moon really comes from the 12th moon cycle of the year. The native calendar consists of 13 moon cycles, because that's how the real world is constructed. The 12th moon is a moon of thanksgiving, of gratitude, of giveaway. And so when I sit down at a meal with friends and they say, "Well, would you like to say grace?" I'm sure, if you don't mind the food getting cold. So I just want you to think about it for a minute. We go to the supermarket now, we get food, and if you go to GreenStar, I don't think Whiteman's does this, but there's a little part on the tag that'll tell you California, Mexico, Australia, China. You know, food comes from all over the world now. Red peppers, almost exclusively organic red peppers, the Netherlands. They tulips and red peppers. I don't know. That's true. So we still have a farmer to thank. We have somebody who had to sow the seeds. We had somebody who had to water and weed and care for the plants. We have somebody who goes out and harvests. We have somebody who washes. We have someone who packs. Now we get to the truck. Only this isn't the first time we've run up against equipment, because the farmer's using tractors, using equipment that's even bigger than the trucks we see sometimes on some of these farms. There's an engineer who had to design that equipment. There's people who had to fabricate the metal and the steel and plastic and whatever. There's people who have to put it together, ship it, sell it. The farmer has to work it. There's, working with the bank, get it to the truck. The truck also had to be designed. The truck drivers got to bring it to us. The gas station people have to have the diesel fuel. The bridges have to be maintained. The truck comes into the receiving. We got those great guys in the receiving who unload the truck, get it to the people who are going to stock it, put it up on the shelves, price it, get it ready so that you can take it to the cashier so the cashier can do their job, so you can get it to your car and thank the engineers that made your car before you can get it home. I'm sure I've missed some people along the way in there. But if you get my drift, you see that chain that it takes for the food to get to you. Now, my concern has been for quite a while, having lived in Manhattan, lived in Pittsburgh, and seen what can happen due to weather and other unforeseen things like a truck strike. What happens when the trucks can't come for a couple days? Store shelves become empty very, very quickly. Very quickly. It doesn't matter if it's a national disaster or if all of a sudden there's no gasoline, whatever it is. If we get to that point when the trucks can't come, it's way too late. We need to build systems now. We have people who already are very, very hungry, starving in this community. Whether it's in the city, people who are too poor to get the food that they need. We all know food stamps not only have been cut recently, but a family of 3 with $190 worth of food for the month, that just doesn't make it really easily, especially if you want decent food. And we look out in the rural areas, and we have seniors, we have kids, we have people who are way off of bus routes, don't have transportation. They can get to a supermarket maybe once a week and have to stock up on the stuff that will last for a week. And a lot of people are eating out of boxes and cans, and that's it. They don't see fresh food. And that's not right. That's not what we as humans, as individuals, need to sustain our bodies and our minds and go forward. If we recognize that we're a community, we have to be involved in not just paying taxes to fix the roads, which we do that here, don't we? I sometimes wonder, because there's a few potholes on the way here. But this is what I see as, you know, most of you probably remember the Aquarian Age concept, that we are in the Aquarian Age, and Aquarius is about society, is about people, it's about community. And this is the time, and we have 2,000 years to complete this cycle, but this is the time to pull community together and start working together. I believe that indigenous tribal groups knew that on a smaller scale than we're dealing with now, but we have to relearn some of those skills. And food is certainly an issue to come around the table for. It's certainly something that we all can see is a pretty basic need. We need water, we need air, we need to keep fracking out so we have clean water and clean air. We need a roof over our head barely. In this weather, it's not so bad today, but food, it's a really big one. And food affects our ability to our brain's ability, our whole ability to understand things. Kids in school need healthy food and a good night's sleep, and most of them aren't getting it. So what can we do in a community like this to support ourselves being, in a sense, in a food equitable situation where we could supply ourselves, where we could be sustainable? We can't grow year-round very well here. We have quite a few different greenhouse operations or hydroponic operations that are providing some food. We would need a whole heck of a lot more. Challenge Industries is building their food hub in Groton, which I know is going to be doing some distribution and hopefully some post-product, what do they call it, some production. And it's always seemed curious to me that at the end of the season, farmers seem to have more zucchini and more tomatoes than they know what to do with. But no one around here cans tomato sauce or does anything like that. We don't really have a commercial kitchen that's set up for people to use around here. But it seems like a great business to get started for somebody. And we need to promote more of that, but it's also kind of a funny back and forth. Some people who were interested in doing food production started talking to some of the farmers around here. And for instance, Stick and Stone sells a lot of green beans to Farm to Table, which is a collective group that started up in Kingston. And they do food production, and they were able to get a location because IBM had this 15-acre complex that they abandoned 20 years ago. And 4 or 5 years ago, these people were farmers and vendors at farmers markets, and they were talking to each other, and they were doing their production of some of their foods into pickled foods and into canned goods in small commercial, like church kitchens and stuff, where they could get some space that was health inspectable. And they saw this opportunity with this abandoned property, and they took over the central kitchen of this old IBM facility and they brought in a flash freezer. They had all kinds of cooking equipment there already. They had to clean the place up, and they started producing stuff. So if you see Brooklyn Salsa, there's a few other names I can't think of. They're all produced down there, and Stick and Stone has made an agreement with them, and Regional Access, which is a great local company, takes the green beans down there and they process them, and now Regional is bringing up frozen veggies and different things that we sell at GreenStar and that they produce down there. But Kingston's a long ways away, and I took a trip down there with a couple of people a few years ago and visited, and we came away going, wow, what a great operation, but we would need Cornell to go out of business, leave town, and nobody else wanted the real estate in order to afford it. Just a big flash freezing unit costs $1 million. So yeah, it's not something we can just turn around in this community and do tomorrow, but it's something that we have to start looking at pulling together. I know Cooperative Extension has been working to try to find a location and get a community kitchen put in that would be health inspectable and would be open for people to rent or to use in some type of a cooperative way, so that not only people could run catering businesses through that, but also they could do some post-production canning, that kind of thing. I think that Robert asked me to come up with some concepts of indicators that we could look at to show in the future if these were getting better or going down, that we were doing better. And I think it's really an obvious one that local and regional is one of the things that people are really focusing on now. We've kind of gotten over the organic hump, and we're differentiating between GMOs and sprayed products and clean, organic, or farmer choice products that are not sprayed and are not GMOs. But we're still getting food from China. We're still getting food from Australia. Maybe it's organic, but what is the carbon footprint? What is the price of bringing that food here and then sending our money there? And that's one of the issues that a local food economy also helps to do, helps to keep the money in the community rather than, Wegmans is a nice place and they're regional, but their headquarters in Rochester. Our money goes to Rochester when we shop there. What do we have to do to keep our systems in the Tompkins County, in this area, up to a standard that can start to support ourselves? I don't have an answer. I'm not looking for the answer, but we have to work on it at many, many levels. And there are people who are working on this very sincerely in our community. We have, sure.
All right. I just want to mention, 12 Homes said it's fine to interrupt him, so I'm interrupting.
Okay.
The GreenStar just developed a space, and there's going to be a kitchen in there. Is that not going to be a community kitchen?
No, it will not be. No, we will be operating, the plan is we're going to be operating that at least 20 hours a day, because we'll have bakery and kitchen in there, but bake staff very often work overnight. So they're producing in the morning, kitchen staff come in and start making the food for the day. So it might even work up to 24 hours. That's the first part. The second part is, if you want to build a public access commercial kitchen, you've gone from this level of regulations and licensing to this level. Insurance, everything. It's a whole different ballpark. And combining them then is a risk for the business, as far as you coming in, renting a space, and then contaminating something, which would put the whole operation into jeopardy. So we could not go that route. We won't, as big a space as it's going to be and everything else, we've concentrated everything in there now. So we just won't have the space or the insurance or the licensing. But we were also working with a community group that was working with Co-op Extension, and mostly Co-op Extension because they got federal grant money to build a commercial kitchen. They were going to have about 6,000 square foot, I believe, of the Neighborhood Pride building to use to build this kitchen, but they had to wait to see how Neighborhood Pride went, and it did go. So that doesn't look like they have a home for their location yet at this point.
Neighborhood Pride did go.
They went out. They're out of business, if you didn't know that. Yeah.
So why isn't the...
couldn't go in there?
Well, they don't have any security in the building at this point. They don't own the building. The family that owns the building, I believe, had a mortgage on it to put the supermarket in, and I'm not positive where all that's out right now. And fortunately, I know they approached us about purchasing some of their equipment, but we had already done all the purchasing for our space already, so it was too late. Yes?
I'm wondering if you know anything about community gardens in this area in Tompkins County, or has that been tried? I know they have the children's garden, because I read about that, but I'm wondering about space that could be used communally by people, families who want to grow and have a fresh produce. Is that available in this?
Let me preface that with, there are basically two groups that are, this is Ithaca, it's very incestuous. There's two groups that are kind of intermingled, a lot of the same people, but working on kind of different aspects of the food system, networking, communicating, and sharing in Tompkins County. Building Bridges, that group is basically trying to get organizations that already have some concern about food in the county, and getting them to share information, communicate, so they're not overlapping, so they're not trying to do the same thing from two different directions. GreenStar Community Projects is working with not just organizations, but concerned individuals from around the county. And in those working groups, we have food kitchen people, community garden people, people from Cooperative Extension, from Challenge Industries, from different places. And 2 meetings ago, the GreenStar Community Projects Networking Group, it was all people presenting who were had been identifying either like their own community garden and food pantry and soup kitchens, but also little farm stands, any place in their area that you can access food. And we're trying to put a map together, basically. As far as the community gardens go, it's kind of surprising how many there are around. But it takes a lot of land to produce enough food for enough people. And one of the issues in town, like in the city here, is the quality of the soil in a lot of locations. There may be an empty lot and it may be owned by the city, and there's been discussion, can the city open that up? Well, now we're into the bureaucracy, and, you know, who's paying taxes, and what's this, and is it up for sale, and was it, you know, was it originally purchased by the city, or is it just vacant? There have been, I believe there was 50-some plots that were, that are open areas that could be farmed in the city of Ithaca. But it narrowed down to something like a dozen that might actually be accessible, that you could be allowed to grow on, and that might not be so contaminated or whatever. And if it's contaminated, you can do something above that. But there's a lot of interest in more community gardens from different people, but most of the time they don't want to travel too far. So that makes it even more difficult to find, you know, space. If there are people who would give their yards up for that, that would be great. I'm sure some of you know what a victory garden was. The victory garden was, during the Second World War, you were encouraged to grow food in your yard, encouraged to grow your own food, for all the reasons we're facing now. The big difference now is agribusiness.
One comment on Victory Garden, we spent time in Boston, so WGBH, the PBS NPR station, is big in our horizon. There's a program about gardening that is not there anymore. It was it was called Victory Garden, if I remember, and went on for 10 or 15 years, and it was as popular as Antique Roadshow. And that started, WGBH is down in one of the old industrial sections of Boston, Alston, and the guy that did that took the parking lot next door, which was an abomination in terms of agriculture, and part of the project was to bring that back to a healthy soil. So it was, and then it went on, and there were, I remember 15, 20 years ago, there were books on Victory Garden, there was a regular weekly show on Victory Garden, and so on and so on. But my point is that stuff that is abandoned for toxic reasons or for bad soil reasons or whatever is reclaimable, and there's good examples of that. Detroit, by the way, is full of victory gardens, as I understand it.
I was going to bring up Detroit. Community projects, when we had our first Food Justice Summit 3 years ago, we've had 3. The first year we brought in Malik Kalini from Detroit, who is a street activist, farmer, has been working on some of these projects. And the second year we brought in, I can't remember her name right now, but also from Detroit. In discussions with them about what's happened in Detroit, one of the very honest statements that Malik made was, well, you have things different in Ithaca, because in Detroit, we're in the middle of this huge black ghetto, and the buildings are abandoned, and it's probably some white investor who owns the building, and he's not coming here. He's not going to come check on his building, not in our neighborhood. And it's abandoned, and the windows are broken, and heroin addicts, crack addicts, whatever, have been going in and crashing there. So he says, we know they're not coming, so we come in as a community. We clean out the building, we board over the windows, we paint murals on the walls, we dig up the yard, and we plant food. And he says, but you know, here you got to get permission. Here you got to find somebody to do it. And they've developed it to a point in Detroit where not only are they getting permission, but they have a shared tool program where a truck full of hose and rakes and whatever goes around to all the different ones and loan out, and it's all kind of a cooperative shared venture. They do the distribution cooperatively. They've been working for about 2 years now to start their own food co-op, so they can also do purchasing and bring in canned goods and packaged goods. And they've been working for years. And basically, why do people start working on something like that? Because they have to.
They're hungry.
Yeah. And they got really left out in the cold food desert that came from there. That's where the term first came from Detroit.
This is kind of an answer and a question to the answer to something you asked earlier when you were talking about how much work it took to get something done locally. And I'm not shamelessly plugging, but I'm using this as an example from which to extrapolate. My son makes yogurt in Lodi, Ithaca milk and Ithaca water buffalo. And Chobani has shaken hands in Albany, and now they're opening a farm in Cortland. And even at GreenStar, you go and look at the yogurt, and there's a sign, Chobani, $1 for the little 8 ounce. And my son's is $1.79. Well, nobody's going to buy the local yogurt. He has none of the advantages of Chobani. And I've watched this over the past few years. And, you know, I've taken his yogurt to potlucks and told my friends about it, brought it here to church sometime. But there's, you know, there's no way to with that kind of liaison with politics that local people and producers can compete.
It's, yeah, there's two aspects to it. One is what people are willing to pay, or what they're willing to pay for. I personally would rather pay for local organic quality, especially somebody I knew made something, and pay more and forego something else. But we're very accustomed to shopping for the best price in this country. And the best price is the little tag on the shelf, not the real cost of it coming down the line, especially when you're talking about agribusiness food subsidies and stuff. It's ridiculous how much money we as taxpayers are putting into cow food, corn, and into ethanol, and into all the corn syrup and byproducts and the soy products and the stuff that our tax dollars are going to. That $1 price is artificial compared to the $1.75. It's part of our whole system. We have to either change the system, or we have to change the way we vote with our dollars.
Who is the we? I mean,
all of us.
You and I might decide to pay $1.79 for, you know, the local yogurt or buy local wine, but the majority of people on a budget don't even have that option of making that decision.
Yes.
And then I see, like,
It's
it's like the rich get richer. I see newspaper articles about Chobani in the Cornell newspaper, the Tompkins Weekly, the Ithaca Journal, regularly. And they sponsored a classroom at the New Stocking Hall at Cornell, so they keep upping the ante.
Mm-hmm.
And the Olympics.
It's also the advertising you have to look at too, and the amount of money that advertising gets and makes, is incredible.
Can I add a note here? Not to disagree at all, but I just read an article in the New York Times magazine about a couple months ago. It said Chobani just started about 6 or 8 years ago in New York State. So I'm wondering if they would qualify as regional. And I'm wondering if they aren't an example. I know that they paid attention to the purity of their ingredients and who their buying network is. So I wonder if that's a good representative of the industrial model. They certainly have taken a lot of its tools. But do you know anything about Chobani and whether?
I don't really know them, no. But when you get, there's also the economy of scale, which comes into issue with food production.
Yeah.
If you have a huge facility and you've got equipment that can pop out yogurt or whatever, and your wages and your overhead, per container is low. When you're doing a more ma-pa, home-based or small operation, the amount of labor and everything that goes into that container is twice as much, which You know, it's really unfortunate the way our system is built that way. It's been designed very specifically since the Second World War toward a production line mentality, not toward people, but toward money, basically toward profit. And the machine has gotten to the point, evolved to the point where in many capacities it's faster, better, cheaper than humans. And it's just degrading humans all the way down the line, you know, whether it's on the workforce or in the kind of food that comes out of the machines and goes into the stores. And it's devaluing our work ethics and everything else. It's gotten to the point where you have Occupy movements and people really, you know, talking about the 1% compared to the 98 or 99%, and people understand what that means at this point. When are we going to get together and collectively say enough already? Obviously we're not there yet, but we should be.
I'd like to approach the other half of the statement you made, which is, one was change the way we buy stuff, and the other was change the system. Is there any work that you know of getting done in Tompkins County, either through GreenStar or through other organizations that are really attempting to change the agricultural model in the country? And I could give a lot of examples, but let me just leave it at that, because I'd like to hear if you know of stuff going on.
Well, to change it in the country is kind of big.
Sure, but it could change here. So change it in a chunk of society. Pick your chunk.
On the intellectual level, at least, the GreenStar community projects and the Building Bridges networks are working toward that. Practically, we have Groundswell and a few other organizations, Co-op Extension, that are supporting new farmer training and accessing new farmlands that people can rent and grow on. We have, in the 15 years since I've been back here, we've gone from, I think, maybe 20 local little organic farms to at least 75 or 80. I mean, it's grown considerably. And really impressive to me, we had a Green Builders Network for a while, all people who were involved in some type of post and beam, straw bale, whatever building. And these 4 20-something people showed up to one of our meetings. And we're all like, whoa, 20-something-year-old strong backs want to lift those beams and help, great. And they were like, oh no, we moved to this area because we want to start an organic farm. And I'm like, well, you must be in it for the money, right? Because, you know, 20-something and you want to start a farm, it's hard work and you don't get paid much. But that's what these people wanted to do, and they're successful. And they're in farmers market now. And I've seen a lot of people coming to this, but there are, Groundswell is a great organization that's really been helping to train and foster farming in our area. League, Community Project, Cooperative Extension, a few different organizations have been trying to see how we can help facilitate having a commercial public kitchen in this area. Like I said, Cooperative Extension has grant money that they can put toward it. And
is that federal grant money or
USDA? Yeah.
That's the one we want.
And Challenge Industries is, I don't know how far along they're with their process of their distribution hub out in Groton, but their ideal will not only be helping to transport food from local farms to local stores, but also to do some post-production and some more growing. They're planning on having even more greenhouses than they have now. So there's steps being made in those directions. One of the interesting things to me that I meant to bring up when I was talking about the location in Kingston is GreenStar approached a few of our farmers, our vendors, to talk about, you know, well, what if we could set something like this up, or what if we can hook you up with even, you know, sending the stuff down to Kingston and coming back. And some of the farmers are like, whew, you know, my wife and we have 3-4 employees, and we've got so much land we're doing, and, you know, I don't want to be a business. I don't want to be big. I'm doing, you know, I'm selling at the farmer's market, I'm selling my extra to GreenStar maybe, or doing CSA, and I'm getting by nicely, and I'm comfortable. Why would I want to have 20 people working for me and 3 times as much land to worry about? So there's that kind of too, you know. You don't want to make the farmer all of a sudden be one of these huge agribusinesses. That's not what they want.
There's a commercial kitchen in the Varna Community Center where they used to be. Jim, is it still there? And you can rent space, and you know, there was someone. I used to teach Tai Chi in there, and there were all sorts of other classes in there, and there was someone who used to sell something, I forget what, at the farmer's market. Used to come in there and cook up big batches of stuff, but I don't know about the flash freezing stuff, but probably everything else you could do there.
Yeah, there's a few places around. A couple of the churches have kitchens. You know, the Women's Community Building had one when it was here. The old Regional Access had one, and I believe that Macro Mama still uses that one.
That's the one who was doing it in Varna.
But it's not, it's part of it's the scale, the size, first off. None of the kitchens that I know of are very large, and none of them have storage facility. And that really comes down to it. If you're cooking for a catering meal tomorrow, that's one thing. But if you're trying to cook to have a product that you want to sell, then you need storage, you need, you know, canning abilities. It starts to get much more complicated. That's why down in Kingston they started to focus first on flash frozen food and on pickled food, because you don't have to have the same canning requirements in effect for pickled food, because it's not going to go bad. So there's many considerations along the way. When we were first having meetings about a community kitchen about 2-3 years ago, there were quite a few caterers, vendors, who came to the meetings to see if we were going to be able to pull anything off that could be a benefit to them. And they started collecting what their needs would be. And we're talking about freezer lockers and refrigeration and dry goods storage and equipment storage, and that's why it got up to, they were talking about 6,000 square foot over here.
One thing to, listening to you in terms of expansion of organic farming in the county and so forth. Of course, what also is expanding is residential sprawl. And one of the things that what needs to happen, I think, is and this has to go, unfortunately, through town government, which is a whole other issue of, you think about bureaucracy, that's one that moves very slowly. But there is a process, and this could be at the county level, where the assessment department could change the way they assess properties, in part based on soil fertility. And whereas what they do is they go for the highest and best market price, which is a retail, residential, commercial sort of thing versus agriculture. I don't know whether or not the local assessment department has total control over how they change that process, if it has to also go through the state, because the state also dictates a lot of these rules. But it would seem that as the county is beginning to grow in population, a lot of the best soils, which typically are on better slopes and so forth, are going to go away, and that will impact ultimately the problem of sustainable farming within the county. So now is not too soon to start thinking in terms of, or having groups of people start thinking in terms of talking to local town boards with regard to how are they looking at agriculture, and what can they do with regard to local zoning and that sort of thing to enhance the kind of agricultural that you're talking about in terms of longer-term sustained programs. Because at some point it's going to go away. And so all the efforts you're working on could be jeopardized at the same point, just by the process of normal growth, expansion, and so forth. And it's a multidimensional problem, as you shortly said.
Yeah, it's again, where we have put our values and how our economic system operates. And when you look at real estate as an investment or as something you want to get capital out of, then if that's your focus, you're going to look for the highest yield and put up as big a building and stuff as many people in there as you can get rent for or whatever. Now we have to really change the way that we look at our internal structures in towns and cities, and a lot of people have been doing that for at least the last 10, 12 years, if not longer. But it's a major head change from how we took over this land. When you look at the roads going between the lakes here and into Seneca, you'll notice that not only do a lot of the roads over towards Seneca Lake have family names that change after, maybe a few blocks, but they're also all straight line, chopped up square, which is how they doled out the different parcels to the different revolutionary soldiers. But it's also, since Roman time, the way that this over-intellectual brain that we've been developing has been seeing how we should live in straight lines, square blocks, and square houses, which, if you think about it, we've taken ourselves out of green, brown environments with bird noises and water noises and all of that, and we've put ourselves into concrete and blacktop, square living situations with light pollution and noise pollution and color that is not what we evolved in nature with. And there's a working group out in Seattle, Olympia, Washington area that have been working on a urban redesign concept of taking over street corners in town and putting your own little free library on one corner and maybe a sitting place with an awning over it on another corner, and painting the intersection and making it a more comfortable place for people to come out of their buildings, not get in their car and leave, but see their neighbors and interact with their neighbors. Most of the time, most of suburban America, that's when they see their neighbors, as they're leaving in their car or coming back in, and that's it. If you look at most tribal or indigenous cultures, there was always almost always, a bending toward round housing in some way or another, and into laying out a village in a round way. And a lot of villages, maybe I will use this, a lot of villages would have a bunch of houses around a shared community area, and that would then be part of another grouping and another grouping, and there'd be all these communal areas in between where not only you could grow things, often have shared cooking, but similar to some of the old villages and towns where the butcher lived upstairs from the butcher shop and the baker lived upstairs, So the baker and the butcher and everybody knew each other's kids, and if you're messing around in the street, doesn't matter if it's your dad or someone else's dad going, hey, straighten up, kid. You know, that's the village that it needs to raise a kid, and that's what we need to think about in our planet. If we're going to go forward, is we should be bringing the spaces to grow and the spaces to interact with nature into our living environments instead of these pristine, disgusting looking plastic molds.
It was a number of years ago, a person was doing a study comparing Ithaca to Zurich, Switzerland, limited land and lake at one end. And one of the things in Zurich that they were doing, they were building high-rise apartments because they were running out of space. But those high-rise apartments provided gardening spaces as well as a community compost, and which wasn't happening here, hasn't happened here. But that's another way of putting people together. And if you're out gardening, you're usually part of a community. You're out there at the same time, and you know the people that have gardens on either side of you and whether they're good gardeners or not.
An interesting note on Switzerland is we lived there, compliments of the corporation I worked for 3 years. In those high-rise apartments, we were in Geneva, the French end, but I think it's consistent across the country. In the high-rise apartment building, there's 2 national co-ops in Switzerland, Bigro and Co-op. And they run super stores like gigantic Wegmans, and in the ground floor of most of those apartment buildings is a little Migros, and the prices for yogurt in that are the same as the prices down at the superstore. And so you had the co-op function, you had a real distribution and access to food at a common price. It was an amazing, and you walk downstairs to get ingredients for supper. It was amazingly efficient.
You did not have to.
Which brings up the whole co-op.
You didn't have to get in a car. You could just go downstairs, shop for the day, and go upstairs. So the refrigerators were half the size that we have, if that, probably a third. And you know, and then you cooked fresh. You bought what you needed for that meal, and you cooked it. It was really efficient.
Europeans are a little bit more conscious about food and cooking than we are, and definitely the cooperative movement in Europe, especially in the United Kingdom, has gone a long way before us. I think some of that really came up out of the Reconstruction after the Second World War.
Sure.
But also I think that our independent American capitalist bend is an excuse to keep people from organizing and cooperating and keeping the money in that us-them situation. You know, the National Cooperative Grocers Association has fought for about 4 years, and we just last year got a bill passed into the budget that I'm not sure if it's in the Farm Bill or which budget it's in, but that actually for the first time recognizes helping developing co-ops, not just private businesses, but also putting a bill so that there would be funding monies available to loan and to help start up cooperatives in this country of all different types, just as a business model. If you want to go to a college and get a degree in cooperative business management, you have to go to Nova Scotia. No place in this country. Actually, some people from Cooperative Development Services, which is part of the network that we're involved with, they've been researching cooperatives on a larger scale and on an educational scale in Europe and Nova Scotia, and actually did some research work in different places in Italy over the summer. And my understanding is that they're starting a program for the upcoming year, I believe in Bloomington, Indiana, and University of Indiana, where they're going to be teaching cooperative management. But this will be a start for them. It's been kept really lo-fi and under the radar because it's a threat to the capitalist economy. The truth of the matter is that, and I'll make a pitch right here for a free screening of a movie called Food for Change that's happening this Friday at our newly renovated space at GreenStar at the north end of our warehouse building. Doors open at 6:30, light refreshments, movie at 7, panel discussion at 8:30 if you're not tired of hearing me talk, and the other people with me this time. But it's a film, a documentary that kind of follows the ups and downs of food co-ops for the last 120 years in this country. And it shows the effects of the economy, wars, depression, the agribusiness growth after especially the Second World Wars, but how this has been this kind of back and forth. And co-ops have played a really big part in pulling different sectors of the economy together in this country. The fact that 75% of geographic United States electric service is from co-ops. 75% of the country is serviced with electricity from cooperatives. Why? Because similar to Groton, NYSEG said, nah, we're not going to run power lines to you, there's not enough of you. We can't make our money back for 50 years, the heck with you. So Groton says, okay, then we'll buy it from you at the wholesale price and distribute it to our people at a wholesale price. They got great electric because they're doing it themselves. There is the need, many farmer cooperatives out in the Midwest and in the middle of this country, where the farmers said, we need storage silos, but I can't afford $200,000. What if me and 6 of my neighbors get together? And that's what they did. And they do that for equipment, they do it for storage, they do that for getting their products to market. There's quite a few areas where it is a very viable and working thing, but it's usually because someone else isn't there making a profit doing it. So it's not accessible to you otherwise. How about you, because you have...
Yeah, sure. So I think what's really key on this, and I guess I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about how you could engage a consumer in these cooperative business models, because a lot of what we tend to see is farmers market. You see a farmer who is doing something, you can engage with them, or I think of like the healthy food for all, go to the farm to table dinners where you're there and you see it, but you're talking about this background industry that's done in a different model. That still needs to be supported, and it's hard to engage, or at least try people to know how to engage with that. So for example, I've been living in co-ops the whole time I've been at university, and I try really hard to convince people that maybe it's worth buying your lentils from Regional Access, where you know a little bit more about where they're coming from, than the cheapest you can get at Wegmans. But making that business, as a consumer participating in this cooperative business is hard because people don't see it. So,
I'm not quite sure where the question was there.
Yeah, I guess the question is, what are the mechanisms you think to help consumers participate in the businesses of cooperatives that aren't obvious? Is the idea. Because I didn't know that, for example, electricity was cooperative in a lot of places, and I wouldn't know how to, if I liked that and wanted to support it, what would I do?
It's a funny area to start getting into. I believe that, for instance, at GreenStar, we do far less self-aggrandizing advertising than we could. We don't really tell people everything we do. And I think part of that is a humbleness, maybe. Part of it is how much do people really want to hear about that? There's a lot of information out there if you want to research it. I think local first is doing work toward that to bring people's consciousness more to keeping money local and to supporting the neighbors, which is a very cooperative effort. As a business model, it's the only democratic business model I know of. It's just not, people aren't educated about it. And I think that's a really hard one to look at how you can correct that. We've talked about it for sure, but we don't want to always be standing on the soapbox, or handing out paper at the door, trying to get people to understand the difference. And people are, when we've done surveys and we've tried to open that conversation, people generally respond that they're just too busy, they're fine with everything the way it is, they don't want to get more involved, they don't want to know more. We have 9,000 some members, and if we get 400 people to vote in an election or a referendum, we're lucky. People, it takes time and energy to take in that information. And if you don't have time and energy, you're not going to bother trying to get it.
I'd like to tie together one thing you said and one thing Jim said, and also local activism. And that changing zoning is an interesting model that takes a lot of effort. And the people that come to this meeting are the ones that can work it, because we're in the community, we've been there a while, we understand all the processes. Your statement about styles of living and proximity of living is a very, I think, important thing that some people are starting to think about. One thing that's happened in Massachusetts, and it's drawn major coverage for the Boston Globe, and that is small towns changing the downtown zoning to reinstall residential zoning. So the downtowns would be maybe a couple of blocks, and they would have been all zoned for commercial or retail or whatever. And changing it to residential means suddenly, and downtowns, as we know, tend to hollow out a little bit. Chatham was one of the towns out on the Cape, which is not a poor town, that changed so it's residential, and so suddenly apartments started springing up, or condos started springing up over stores and in office buildings and more. And suddenly you had people downtown living there, and the downtown revitalized. So it's that really interesting little change that makes a lot of difference. And if you couple that with some kind of green space, garden plots and stuff like that,
Community gardening.
Could be really amazing. I think it's one of those small changes that I think has consequences way beyond
the model that the developer was using for the building in College Town that we were going to be a part of was after he came back from Japan and saw that kind of situation with a food store in the bottom and bike room and get away from car transportation and all. Hopefully the zoning will come down, that plot will work, or that design will work, but unfortunately it looks like the zoning is going to remove the parking space requirement, but is going to change some of the what's residential, what's commercial, and it may cut off the back of that whole building design. So we don't know where that's going, but that's one of the people around here working on that type of model. I don't know what happened to the pod car people. If any of you knew, there was a group of people who were wanting to bring pod cars to Ithaca, and those are the little like electric train thingies, but they're small. They hold about 6 people each. There's different designs, and they run on a rail up above. So the concept was to put in the structure along the side of, for instance, State Street that would overshadow what would be parking, but the idea is to get rid of some parking, so where you have southern exposure, you can actually have raised beds instead of parking spaces, and continue that into the building designs. They also had designs of redoing some of the buildings so that their roofs could support growing, or doing the tiered balcony growing that many countries are doing. It's a big mind change, and again, it's getting into money is such a way of the normal way of thinking about things.
Well, we have, speaking of Varna, I have been living there now about 15, 16 years now. Shortly afterwards, we started working on a new comprehensive plan, changing the zoning and so forth. Well, we just got it done last year, where what we have done in Varna, we didn't get the whole community, we got the downtown portion of Varna. It's zoned in 3 different ways, and it is zoned in such a way as to promote a neighborhood commercial residential mixed type of thing in one of our crossroads situation. And the rest of it is zoned in such a way as to protect the resources that we have there and or promote certain kinds of development within the spaces that are still available for production. It takes, but all of it is right now is a piece of paper. So there's a two-phase. It took us more than 10 years of really pushing to get this far. Now we have to push to say, town, okay, look at, you've already invested tens of thousands of dollars in the planning process, but you have to go beyond this now and now invite in not just the current landowners, because the current landowners are in for exactly the thing you're talking about, as opposed to developing it in context of what the overall plan is, because what we have for planning is a laissez-faire attitude. We don't look in an ecological perspective, sort of, in terms of how the pieces fit together. And that is a real struggle to get across to local elected officials. We need to there's a whole problem there in terms
You're a
of
benevolent dictator.
well, no, it's a process of educating elected officials as to what community really means. And I think that's a whole different concept, because what they see is, you know, from an economic perspective, what's going to keep taxes low, and what's going to promote activity that is going to be somebody else is going to pay for.
Right.
Or you can elect officials that know what community really means, or encourage people to run for official offices who know that, and I think that's probably something that hasn't been explored, that the people who understand these kind of things are reluctant to put all of their time and energy into running for
Or we can encourage people like GreenStar to continue the educational side of their business with this upcoming Friday night thing, and expand on it. Because I think educating elected officials underneath that educate the community, because that's true. That to me is a long-term approach. That's off to GreenStar for.
None of what happened in Varna would have happened without getting a large number of local residents to stand up, and when the zoning maps were first revealed, the thing that they made a big mistake is that when the consultants came in to do the zoning, they left Varna out as a kind of a non-entity sort of thing. Happened to be the second largest population center within the town. Anyway, I didn't want to take that.
But speaking of education, TC3 just began this new farm program, which has a lot of potential for this kind of education. And those courses are available for all people.
Yeah,
and it's in Dryden.
Well, it's going to be a great project. See that up and running. I think part of the problem is that when it comes to zoning and cities looking at their planning and future growth, there's all this touting of statistics by like Walmart's or Home Depot or whatever of what it means when they come into a neighborhood and how much sales they're going to generate, and so how much tax revenue. But when Cohen let these companies come in and build, they gave them tax breaks and incentives to build. So there's money we're putting up front into it. And I don't know, I could not figure out how this community was going to handle a Borders and a the other bookstore,
Barnes and
and
Nobles.
Barnes and Nobles, and obviously we can't handle both of them. But we got Lowe's and Home Depot still going. And I'm really kind of confused how we can have two of them here. But I sure know I used to love the little lumber yard that was over by Hunt's, over on Elmira Road. And that didn't take long for that to disappear. There are a couple others, the paint store, you know. And these are the ones closer to town. These are the ones people could more likely walk to. These are the ones where the money was going back into town for the most part. I mean, I know they were getting wood from just down like in Van Avenue, from Cotton Handler and stuff, but Lowe's and Home Depot,
China.
that could be coming from Czechoslovakia. Yeah, really. They put logs on a boat, because time, money. They put logs on a boat, the boat goes out to sea and they're milling it on the boat, so that when it comes here, they've got the lumber going off. I don't want to waste any time. I want to get it out there. It's
There are probably fewer regulations on the deforestation in those places.
They're selling some Czechoslovakia wood at Cayuga lumber too. It's really great.
Well, that's amazing.
I might mention, probably should break up about 10:15. We've got about 2 or 3 minutes. Last questions.
Some years ago, there was a yogurt company that came in here big time called Brown Cow.
Mhm.
Is that still in existence?
Oh, the company's in existence. They had their facility out in, I guess it's Danby area. It's near the, near that experimental housing area from the 60s. The Yay God community and all of that. I can't remember what it's called now. But yeah, there's, the facility is just kind of abandoned and out there. They were a small organic yogurt company that did the cream on top kind of yogurt, and they got big. And they moved to bigger facilities with more access to milk, and they stopped being organic, and yeah, they're still going gangbusters.
I remember when they were here, they were having problems getting rid of the quantity, and most of it was going to New York City. Yogurt comes and goes.
Just curious, you mentioned a lot of community efforts and organizations to illustrate various points, but some of us might not be familiar with these organizations. Could you, any takeaway comments about what organizations in the community you think would be good to learn more about? And start with just an explanation of what it is across the street from GreenStar that's going on, and how that organization differs from these.
Okay. Across the street meaning Emmys, or across the street meaning
the space?
Okay. It's kind of a two-edged question. The first part, it really depends like what your interest or focus would be, because like Groundswell I mentioned is working as an incubator for farmers. Different groups are kind of focused on different things, and there's so many of them that I probably won't be able to think of them all, but it'd be easier if, like you said, oh, I'm interested in co-op housing. It's like, okay, well, I can point you up in this direction, you know. As far as what's going on in what somebody has called the GreenStar campus now, because we're spreading along Fulton Street, it seems. The store, unfortunately, is still tiny, and the parking lot's still tiny and kind of gnarly. We can't do much of anything to grow the store, but we keep trying. Across the street immediately, what used to be the Enterprise car rental building, we're turning that into classrooms. We'll have one main classroom in there and a small meeting or interview room, or what could be a small classroom, probably holds 8 people. But the main classroom will probably hold 30 people. And you know, once we get certificate of occupancy for that many people, we'll find out. At this point in time, we're having our meetings there, our board meetings. We're having classes there, and we're partnering with the Children's Garden, and they're doing their winter classes and work there, and then we're going to be working with them at the gardens in the summer. That space will be primarily for things like that. We're gonna have a teaching kitchen in there, so I believe it'll have like a mirror so you can see people cooking on the stove top and have real cooking classes, which is one thing we have not been able to do up until this point. Then as you continue to the main warehouse building that we purchased, both buildings in that lot, the first part of it will still be our administrative offices, our finance department, our human resources, and our marketing department are all housed in there. And we have storage warehouse also in that first third of the building, almost half of it really. And inside there we have not only pallet storage on shelving, but we have a big, you could drive through it, walk-in cooler, and we have a large freezing unit there. And we not only keep some of the stuff we purchase for resale in the refrigeration and in the freezing unit, but we rent out to at least 8 or 10 farmers at this point who keep product in refrigeration units. And for instance, when we need carrots, we have a pallet full of carrots from one of the local farmers, and we'll go in and weigh out 50 pounds and mark it off as a sale to them and take the carrots across the street to the store.
Nice.
And meanwhile, they're renting by the pallet space by the month. So we've got that back and forth. We're also doing CSA for 1 or 2 farms out of the space. Then we move to the part we renovated. And 3,000 square foot approximately, we're making a central kitchen and bakery. So all of the baking that was done at Oasis location, if you don't know it, in the back is a couple of big ovens and baking racks and everything behind Oasis. That's coming out. Also the sushi preparation that's been done at the Oasis location is coming out, going to the central location. That will be more of a change in some ways than at the West End store. At the main store, our whole behind the deli kitchen area pretty much is going to be the same, except that we've removed the large 8-burner stove and put a small stove in. The biggest difference there at the West End store is that we will not have 14 people working behind that counter all at once. It's a zoo back there. How they get what they've gotten done in that small space is amazing. But that's going to make less crowd and more ability to do food on demand. So we're thinking, and this is the future, don't quote me yet till they get the systems worked out, but thinking about having breakfast, you know, eggs the way you want it, whatever, French toast, pancakes, that kind of thing in the morning, and more in the selection of like sandwiches and food that is made to order later on in the day. So that's going to open up a little bit more product room there at the West End store. And what was the classroom / banana and bread storage room there as you first come in is going to be opened up, and we're going to have a larger member center there for more information sharing and more of a center that there will be more educational information and maybe even somebody staffed there on busy hours to help people, but also going to open up to more prepared and grab-and-go food and more produce. Both the deli and the produce are going to creep down a little closer and have some more shelf space. Then in our kitchen and our bakery, we not only will be doing everything we have been producing, but instead of only having 1 muffin per day, you know, blueberry on Thursday or whatever, we'll be able to have more selection and choice because we'll have the room to bake more.
This is all in the new space.
In the new space. And we'll also be able to bake for sale to other organizations. Like we sell stuff now at this point a little bit to other groups, but we don't really have the capacity to make more than what we ourselves can sell. So there'll be more products offered and catering. We can open up our deli manager to do catering, which he is fantastic at, right down to the presentation. It's beautiful. Then the 3,400 foot at the north end of the warehouse. Has a shared wall with pass-through and access from our kitchen bakery. So it's renovated now to hold 228 for a sit-down meal. So we could do weddings, we could do conferences, big lectures, we can do movie screenings, we had community projects had a benefit concert with the blind spots there last weekend. So it works. It's a great community space. It really looks so much nicer now. The farmers market is there on Saturdays, the winter's farmers market. And we'll be able to cater events in that space then from our kitchen bakery. And we're getting to the point where we got certificate of occupancy, but it's going to be probably 2 months till all the licensing and everything is completed on how we can use the space. But we've met code with sprinklers and everything else. So we haven't worked out the details as to what the cost is going to be for renting the space out or any of the agreements that come with that. But by April, we should have that all figured out and up and running.
We got to break up because there's a class coming in here eventually.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.